First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank the Ministry of Finance, the NIC, and the Vipc for inviting me back to speak at this prestigious event. It is genuinely an honor to participate at a conference that recognizes a vibrant, functioning private capital ecosystem as a critical engine to power Vietnam's next phase of national development. What global capital looks for in an international financial center. Before we dive into the what, we should spend some time on the why. The announcement of Vietnam wanting to establish its own international financial center might have struck some observers as overly ambitious, possibly unrealistic. Portfolio capital has already been flowing in and out of Vietnam fairly actively over the last couple of years and in growing amounts. So why an IFC? The answer is simple. Vietnam wants to be a place where regional and global capital doesn't just get invested occasionally, but resides permanently, where it is managed, structured, financed, recycled, and hence compounded. If you allow me an analogy of a wedding scene. Today, Vietnam, here, the father of the bride, is merely hosting the wedding, while there's an entirely different group of people that's charging for flowers, the band, and the venue. Going forward, Vietnam wants to capture the broader economic substance of that capital and all its affiliated sources of income and activity. The fees, the jobs, the know-how, the tax base, and the stability and the continuity of all of that. For those of us who've been following Vietnam closely for many years, the ambition at least is completely understandable and justified. Vietnam's delivered one of the world's most exciting and strongest secular growth stories over the past 20 plus years, and it is to us on a credible path to becoming Southeast Asia's most relevant economy. Vietnam's leadership has built a reputation for ambitious long-term nation building and has shown its determination to execute with remarkable speed. More recently, Vietnam's upgrade to FTSE secondary emerging market status has validated the country's development progress from a capital markets perspective. In summary, the case for Vietnam's IFC from a macro and a capital markets perspective is clear, and the opportunity to double down in the form of an IFC is real. What it needs now, ladies and gentlemen, is execution. Because IFCs can fail. Some never come off the ground for being incomplete or uncompetitive in their architecture. Others sizzle out when they lose internal support to reach sufficient mass and become self-perpetuating. Let me share a few observations around common features and basic principles that I hope will contribute to establish a lasting world-class IFC in Vietnam. The what? Private capital ecosystems do not emerge naturally, organically, somehow by themselves. They're engineered. Singapore engineered it, Hong Kong engineered it, Dubai engineered it, Abu Dhabi engineered it, the Caymans engineered it. None of these hubs became successful because they had nice logos and held conferences in wonderful hotels. Although, to be fair, nice conferences and great hotels do help. They succeeded because they were built based on complete systems and a blueprint from the top down. A financial center isn't merely a single policy or a single law. It is an ecosystem of interdependent factors. Some of them pure necessity from an infrastructure standpoint, others are commercial points of attraction or some combination thereof. In any case, these elements reinforce one another. Fund managers will not relocate to Vietnam without the basic fund infrastructure, that is a competitive or a predictable taxation framework, or complete legal certainty as to the enforceability of their contracts. Advisors and service providers are not going to arrive here unless their clients have it. A deep talent pool is not going to emerge unless you have world-class champion employers on shore, and so on and so forth. The before mentioned factors are fairly well understood, I would think, and generic in nature, regardless of the location. Which is why at this point, I want to mention that you have competition. Capital is highly rational and for the most part flows fairly freely and quickly to where conditions are most favorable. While I wouldn't go as far as saying you need to beat Singapore on every single front, you should certainly understand the relative importance of every one factor and keep the package in mind. More important than the what might be the how. If you allow me this remark, someone who's been here for a long time, Vietnam has a history of, let's call it, fragmented policymaking. This is perfectly understandable in a dynamic and fast-evolving market and environment as yours. But my humble advice here would be to approach this particular project with a fresh and holistic view, coming from a future that you want to see happen, and seek the input and the resources necessary to implement that future, including expertise from both inside and outside Vietnam. Execute in close proximity to global best practices and try to resist the temptation to recreate the wheel in a uniquely Vietnamese way. Expecting some laughs at this point. Which brings me to my last point. Confidence. Global capital looks for confidence in form of trust, predictability, and credibility long term. More so today than ever before. And I would like to think private capital more so than public capital in some ways. We private capital people are quite different from our public capital brothers. Those guys will date you quickly, but they travel light. We, on the other hand, we're slow. We are patient. We engage deeply. We meet the family. We ask for the 5-year plan. And we ask for the 10-year plan. We're a little shy. But once we decide to like you, we don't just date. We marry your economy, we marry your narrative, and for better or worse, till death or a really bad deal do us part. So before you walk down the aisle with us, make sure your house is in order and it stays in order. Because the two of us are going to be living here for a really long time. More seriously, take your time, be careful with what you promise, deliver reliably, and stick to your end of the bargain. While investors in emerging markets will give you some room to tweak and adapt, there's a limit to how much back and forth, delay, or disappointment we can handle before we start questioning the viability of the project as a whole. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, by committing to Vietnam's 2045, you have upped the game and you have correctly identified a vibrant, liquid, and efficient capital market as a key ingredient to fund your ambitions. With the right partnership between government, regulators, knowledge partners, entrepreneurs, domestic and global institutions, I genuinely believe Vietnam can build one of the most important private capital and wedding planning ecosystems the world.